think I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. So welcome back, everybody. Thank you again for your patience as we kind of extended our agenda a little bit. We like to be a little bit fluid and make space. So we are at the next segment of our agenda. Just a couple quick reminders before I invite in Laurel Nash to provide her welcome from BC. There is a Q&A function at the bottom. I know several people posted questions of our keynote panel, which was great. I'm going to encourage our keynote speakers, if you're still on, to go ahead and look at those questions that were posed and see if we can't answer them kind of in that Q&A function. But also, as we proceed through the forum, for everybody, if you see a question that really resonates with you and you would really like it to be asked, you can do something called upvoting, which you click on a little button and it kind of just basically adds sort of weight, I guess, to that question and shows that more than just one person wants to ask it. So that kind of gives us as the moderators an opportunity to see where the real questions are coming from and how many people want them asked. So FYI. Okay, enough about that. I am going to go ahead and turn the screen over to Laurel Nash, who again is the Assistant Deputy Minister for the BC Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy. And she's going to provide her welcome on behalf of them. And of course, they're a co-host of the forum. So Laurel, take it away.
Great, thank you very much, Hillary. And good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be actually connected again. I think this morning's event for me just highlighted the strength and power of Mother Nature and our fall storms. This, I think, was one of the first ones that we've had in the Salish Sea this year. We had a lot of power outages, and I'm thinking that some of that may have affected my connectivity this morning. So I'm very grateful to be here. This is my second forum, and I have learned so much in the short time period that I've been in this role and participating in the forum. And I would really like to begin by acknowledging the territory that I am on as well, the Lekwungen speaking people, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanic nations, and the lands and the sea that they continue to steward. And I'm so grateful to be able to live, work, and play in this territory and be part of this forum this year. Also just wanted to acknowledge, thank you very much for the introduction. Lovely always to hear how Ray Harris is doing. And I'm glad that he is out enjoying being on the land and the water. So that was lovely to hear as well. Coming in a little later due to my introductions, really listening to our keynote speakers and Grand Chief Stephen Point, Dr. Norman, and Jay Julius really, I think, has really set the spirit for the conversation that we're having over the next day and a half. And I look forward to continuing that with you, hearing from the other presenters, and then also just getting into the overview that Dale and I will be doing regarding what we've heard over the past and also what we've been hearing today. So thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to Hillary.
Thank you so much, Laurel. Well, you can go ahead and stay on video and audio because this next segment is a look back. And if you look at the agenda, and if you listened earlier this morning, you'll remember that this is our third year of the Salish Sea Forum. So this segment of the agenda is an opportunity to hear from both Laurel as well as Dale Jensen with Washington Ecology, kind of their thoughts about the progress and key outcomes that have happened over the course of the past 2 years. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Laurel and Dale and go off audio and video. So welcome again, Dale.
Oops. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Hillary. Thanks, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. and don't want to have technical difficulties on a time like this. I just want to echo too, what Hillary and Laurel have said about the opening this morning. My gosh, the panelists, the speakers, the wisdom, the thinking that you have all shared with us. I now wish that we would have had a day break between, the words that you shared, the wisdom that you shared, and, what I could have done to build into my speaking points, this morning a little bit. But it is such a pleasure to be sharing a reflection back, as Laurel has said, on where we have come the last couple of years. And then, of course, throughout the today and tomorrow, we'll have the opportunity to reflect back on some of the things that we're hearing too. So, good morning again, everyone, and thanks so much for being here at the forum and at this session. Both Laurel and I really do appreciate the opportunity to share these reflections about the last Salish Sea Shared Waters Forum. And I'd like to just take a moment to refresh our memory on how the Salish Sea Shared Waters Forum came to be. And I so appreciated Representative Lekanoff's leadership and reflection this morning back on conversations that we have had over the years that continue to form this dialogue, and the importance of transboundary work amongst all of us. So first in 2018, Washington State passed the Strengthening Oil Transportation Safety Act, which required the State Department of Ecology Spills Program to coordinate with British Columbia and Canada to establish the Salish Sea Shared Waters Forum. The purpose is to facilitate the exchange of information to enhance oil spill prevention, preparedness, and response toward the goal of minimizing risks and impacts of spills from vessel traffic in the Salish Sea. The forum serves as a platform for open dialogue for all levels of government from both sides of the border, including Transport Canada, the US and Canadian Coast Guards, tribes and First Nations, environmental groups, and industry. One of the Act's requirements is for Ecology to coordinate with British Columbia and Canada to establish the Salish Sea Shared Waters Forum, which we've done, and to address common issues in the cross-boundary waterways between Washington State and British Columbia. The forum addresses issues such as navigational safety, data sharing, and the impacts of spills on the environment, tribal and First Nations resources, the economy, and public health. Through the forum, we've had important discussions on gaps and conflicts in oil spill policies, regulations, and laws, opportunities to reduce oil spill risk, including requiring tug escorts for oil tankers, articulated tug barges, and other towed waterborne vessels or barges, enhancing oil spill prevention, preparedness, and response capacity, whether an emergency response system in Haro Strait, Boundary Pass, or Rosario Strait will decrease oil spill risk, and of course the impacts of vessel traffic on treaty protected fishing. This year, we're continuing to advance our knowledge and understanding of these topics with a great agenda packed with presentations and panel discussions by leaders around the Salish Sea and adjoining regions. You will hear from tribes on how they've managed the Salish Sea and the Strait of Juan de Fuca and have made advances in areas of response capabilities to ensure its protection. And you'll hear from representatives of different jurisdictions about the work that has been influenced by discussions in previous forums. When planning these forums, we believed a good place to start was with our existing relationship with British Columbia through the Pacific States British Columbia Oil Spill Task Force. We began our planning work with Sarah Brace and Hillary Wilkinson of Veda Environmental, who are our executive coordinator and support for the task force. This work to collaborate, build relationships, and increase our knowledge to protect the valuable environmental, cultural, and economic resources are essential to our future. In Washington State, it's important to us because we're a major oil refining state here in the Northwest, the 5th largest in the nation, with about 20 billion gallons of oil transported through each year by vessel, rail, pipeline, and road. Washington is a primary West Coast destination for international shipping and trade. With 75 port districts, the state has the largest public port system in the world, handling 7% of exports and 6% of imports for the nation. 5 oil refineries receive crude oil from Alaska, North Dakota, Canada, through Oregon, and from various foreign ports. 4 of which are located in the northern part of our state and 1 in Tacoma. We have one of the lowest spill volumes in the nation and continue to strive for our legislatively directed zero spills goal. This cannot be achieved without collaborations, relationships, knowledge, and trust built through forums like this. The safe movement of oil is a regional concern, and we've been working these issues for many years. This forum has provided the opportunity to continue to learn and grow by bringing so many people together to talk about how we can work together to address our shared values and understand how we're all connected through the Salish Sea and adjoining waters. More recently, COVID has added yet another opportunity to learn and grow through a different format. Here we are continuing our work together in a virtual environment. What's interesting about our present virtual environment is that it's providing for much broader participation in information sharing. It's so exciting, as Hillary mentioned earlier this morning, that we have over 300 people registered to attend this year. So reflecting back at the 2018 forum, we set the stage for engaging discussions with presentations by British Columbia and Washington State on preventing, preparing for, and responding to oil spills, followed by a Tribes and First Nations panel discussion organized by Chad Beauchamp of the Makah on treaty right and the relationships being developed with all levels of government to put in place measures that protect resources important to their culture and livelihood in the transboundary environment. We developed visuals that followed the journey of oil from the inland areas by rail and pipeline to the shoreside oil refining or handling facilities, and then on to marine vessel operations. Those visuals are available on the Pacific Stage British Columbia Oil Spill Task Force site. We provided overviews on the different authorities regulating oil as it moves through the region, and then had panel discussions on shared values, hearing from members of the regulated community, local authorities, the environmental community, and industry, with a foundation of understanding of the common operating picture at the end of the day. We started day 2 with a deep dive into ongoing collaborations with a brainstorming session aimed at informing discussion topics for the 2019 Salish Sea Shared Waters Forum. In 2019, we were able to broaden the discussion on treaty rights and provided updates on the progress for some of the work being done to improve oil transportation safety. We focused on vessel traffic impacts to treaty protected fishing and emergency response systems. We also worked with Canadian and US federal, state, and provincial governments to develop a chart showing the regulatory authorities related to oil transportation, which is also posted on the Pacific Stage British Columbia Oil Spill Task Force site. We ended the 2019 forum with an informative and moving discussion with representatives of the Coast Salish Gathering moderated by Dept. This year, we are reflecting on how we've worked together to influence progress, specifically toward a higher awareness of oil movement and how tribes and First Nations insights and lessons learned have informed improvements in oil spill prevention, preparedness planning, and response. A lot of hard work has gone into the planning for this forum, which highlights one of the ways we've been able to collaborate and share information across our border. In the previous 2 forums, we advanced our understanding in several key areas. We increased our collective knowledge of how oil moves around the region, the safety measures in place, spill management efforts underway, and the concerns of the people and organizations with shared values to protect the Salish Sea. We also developed a greater awareness and understanding of the impacts of oil transportation for tribes and First Nations. This allowed us to make headway towards better inroads that facilitate trust and good relationships between all levels of government, stakeholders, tribes, and First Nations. Through our ongoing dialogue, we have identified and created opportunities for cooperation, collaboration, and information sharing. At the highest level, the Salish Sea Shared Waters Forum has been successful in providing key parties with a broader understanding of some of the numerous common and complex cross-boundary issues and challenges relating to the movement of oil in the Salish Sea. We're moving in a direction of safer oil transportation policies all over the region. Huge efforts are being made to understand the impacts of not just oil spills, but vessel traffic on the environmental and cultural resources and the economies in the region. In the Salish Sea, the complexities surrounding transboundary coordination are important to navigate thoughtfully. We have a high level of engagement, but we're always working to stay aware of where everyone is in a transboundary discussion. It's complex and dynamic. Despite the complexities, we're working within our separate jurisdictions towards smart, thoughtful policies to improve oil transportation safety, preparedness planning, and response. We're focused on good outcomes, and we've made some incredible progress in recent years. Transboundary coordination has a lot of moving parts. It's very important, especially in a complex regulatory system, to have agreement on where we are now and where we're trying to go. The past two forums have advanced these conversations more than we could have hoped when we started this journey toward developing a common operating picture. In 2018, the forum further informed policy changes in Washington State with the help of tribes, industry, and in the environmental community. We developed a report on vessel traffic and vessel traffic safety. We began the implementation of legislation focused on reducing threats to southern resident killer whales through oil transportation safety improvement. And we're developing a synopsis on vessel activity to be published next year. There are ongoing transboundary collaborative process to work on oil transportation safety, preparedness planning, and response issues. These discussions are taking place at the Puget Sound Harbor Safety Committee and the Joint Harbor Safety Committee sessions with both US and Canadian participation through the Federal Joint Cooperative Agreement to ensure safe vessel traffic management. The Board of Pilotage Commission, which works with the Canadian Pacific Pilotage Authority on safe pilotage and vessel movement practices. There's also oil spill preparedness and response planning work with Canadian and US federal leadership through CAN-US PAC and CAN-US West, along with Washington State, British Columbia, tribes, and First Nations. In the Pacific States, British Columbia Oil Spill Task Force has done response capability comparability work to identify differences or gaps that can continue to be worked on. We've had a better, more holistic understanding and consideration of inland oil movement knowledge too, but there's more work to be done. We're actively working to find ways for Washington and British Columbia to complement each other on oil transportation safety, response systems, and communication systems that work. Now we're working to overcome challenges in the virtual environment. We're in an era of continuous learning to ensure that we have the best systems and the best capabilities in place to protect our cultural, environmental, tribal, and First Nation resources and economy. Finally, hearing more voices on the topic of oil transportation safety, preparedness planning, and response is important and valuable in all levels of the conversation. The connections we've made and the relationships we're nurturing only serve to improve the outcomes of the work we do together. We're always striving to improve the effectiveness of outreach and communications with tribes and First Nations so that we are able to engage meaningfully at the correct level and with the right people in each sovereign government. It's something we're always working to improve because we believe that good communications and relationships are foundational to the success of our collective work at every level. Making sure that we have proper systems in place to ensure good communication and information shared out if spills happen is critical, and just as important as an effective response. Ahead of that, open and effective communication includes a better understanding of the challenges and opportunities and responsibilities that we each have. The more everyone understands of each other, the better capability we'll have to inform the practices that ensure protection and good outcomes. So I'll turn it over to Laurel.
Thanks very much, Dale. I have the honor and opportunity to just highlight some of the key themes that we've heard from our Indigenous partners over the last 2 years, as well as for this year as well. I think you've already heard from Grand Chief Stephen Point, Dr. Norman, and Jay Julius in particular around our continued need to work together as the Salish Sea transcends our political boundaries and that we're all connected. The key themes that we've heard out of all three forums have been around treaty rights and laws, culture and livelihood, and cooperation and collaboration. I'll turn now to treaty rights and laws. And I'd also just like to acknowledge as well, this is what we have heard as part of the presentations and collaboration that we've had with our Indigenous partners over the last 2 years and leading now into the third. And it's an opportunity for us to highlight what we have heard without speaking on behalf of our Indigenous partners. So with respect to treaty rights and laws, all 3 Salish Sea Forums have had representation from Indigenous nations and tribes that have brought a key focus on tribal and First Nations treaties, rights, laws, and legislation. A strong theme brought forward by our Indigenous partners during previous Salish Sea Forums has been about increased vessel traffic in the Salish Sea and how the cumulative effects impact upon treaty and Aboriginal rights. In the 2018 forum, there was a presentation from the Makah tribe that grounded the forum participants in treaty and inherent Aboriginal fishing rights in the Salish Sea. This presentation focused on treaty rights as the basis for their work with the federal government. There was recognition of the responsibility on both sides to build trust and to honor the treaties that are in place and develop and or enforce those that are not. In 2019, there was also a panel with tribal attorneys that really dug into the topic of treaty rights for the benefit of all those participants. In British Columbia, we respect and continue to work with our Indigenous partners to honor the government-to-government relationship that we have. We all need to work together and focus on our shared interests, wisdom, and responsibilities to steward and manage natural resources. Since the last forum, British Columbia has enacted the BC Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. My colleague Jessica Wood, ADM of the Ministry of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation, will be speaking on that tomorrow. That legislation was developed with the First Nations Leadership Council as we drafted that work. And Jessica will speak more about that as she's part of a panel discussion that is discussing the authorities, legislation, and implementation actions that have been done to ensure protection of treaty rights of Indigenous peoples and advance transboundary spill preparedness, prevention, and response. And I think it's important, again, to highlight what we have heard today in that that transboundary approach is critical because the Salish Sea sees no boundaries. So I'll move to the next slide on culture and livelihood. What we have heard during the forums is the importance of the spiritual value of southern resident killer whales and that the waters are sacred to our Indigenous partners and of the significant importance that it has to all of us. And that we are all connected and borrowing the resources. And I really appreciated Stephen Point's comments on that, as well as we have heard about the impacts to future generations and that we don't own the lands and seas and their resources, but that we are only here to use those and borrow those resources and that they need to be available for our future generations. We've also heard that there is a need to find a path between economics and its impacts on the environment. And specifically, over the last 2 years, we heard about increased vessel traffic as a threat to treaty and Aboriginal fishing rights and title, with key concerns raised in 2019 that included significant impacts from the acoustic and physical disturbance from marine vessels, increase of contaminants in the water, damage and loss of fishing gear, and that major spill could lead to the total loss of fishing. These are concerns that are shared by all partners at the Salish Sea Forum and continue to be highlighted by our Indigenous partners. So the final slide that I'm going to cover today is around cooperation and collaboration and what we have heard over the forums that have been held. And I think it's key that there is a strong desire for tribes and Indigenous nations, non-government entities, and all levels of government to work together to manage our resources. We're all in this together, and we need to take this journey together and to continue this journey together. The second key is the Coast Salish Gathering. We have more shared interest than not. I love to hear that statement from the Honorable Stephen Point. And we want to continue to collaborate and come together in partnership. So there may be an opportunity to forge a stronger connection with the Coast Salish Gathering. We would welcome that. For those that may not be aware, the Coast Salish Gathering is an affiliation that provides a policy platform for tribes in Washington and First Nations in British Columbia to meet with US and Canadian federal governments and Washington and BC provincial governments. The platform builds a collaborative body for mutual shared efforts to identify priority environmental concerns, issues, and projects in the transboundary Coast Salish region within the Salish Sea biome. Discussions at previous Coast Salish gatherings focused on the impacts of oil transportation and the potential impacts to treaty and Aboriginal rights, cultures, and ways of life. And the third item that we wanted to highlight as well with respect to cooperation and collaboration is develop the Canuspac Transboundary Indigenous Caucus. That's a mouthful, isn't it? The Canada-US Pacific Transboundary Caucus forum was held immediately prior to the first forum meeting. And that session involved panelists that shared the origin of the caucus and its initial draft mission and immediate and long-term actions. There were follow-up questions on whether the carrying capacity of the Salish Sea has been reached, which tribes and First Nations should be involved in the caucus, and how to capture spiritual tribal information during formal consultations on proposed projects that will increase oil movement. One of the things that came out of this, and a key first step, was, is there a desire to revisit the mission, and how do participants want to continue that path forward? So that is my portion of our presentation. I want to thank you, and I will transfer it back over to my colleague Dale. Thank you very much, to conclude the presentation.
Great, thanks, Laurel. In continuing on here, oil, as we all know, knows no boundaries. So we continue to learn more about oil behavior and subsurface environmental impacts. We continue to encourage participation and collaboration from all levels of government, tribes, First Nations, and stakeholders. Even though this last forum, we hope that is not that end, but that engagement, collaboration, and our communications will continue. I mentioned earlier the purpose of these forums is to facilitate the exchange of information in our shared transboundary environment. I think we've made significant progress towards that goal over these past few years. There's ongoing work that continues to inform our journey on longevity and the health of southern resident killer whales, understanding the behavior of oil to better minimize impacts. We're also continuing to make investments in response and preparedness planning capacity. Linda Pilkey-Jarvis will be talking about that in a forum later tomorrow. We're in the process of developing a vessel traffic risk model with J.D. Leahy and Jamie Bever of the Board of Pilotage Commission here in Washington State. That'll be later on the agenda today. And even 10 years later, we're working on enhancements rooted in the lessons learned from Deepwater Horizon, including engagement and stronger contingency plans. Nee Irwin will moderate a session on this topic later today as well. There also continues to be a significant improvement in the capability for equipment and personnel to respond to a spill. Another opportunity, as I mentioned before, is the Pacific States British Columbia Oil Spill Task Force, which was formed between British Columbia and the state of Washington after the tank barge Nestucca spill and the Exxon Valdez spill 30 years ago. These two events highlighted in a dramatic way the vulnerability of the West Coast states and British Columbia to spill risks from coastal marine traffic. Awareness arose of the importance of cross-border coordination and cooperation, and the need for firm commitments to protect the unique marine resources of the region. The Pacific States British Columbia Oil Spill Task Force was created in 1989, the result of a memorandum signed by the governors of Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and California, and the Premier of British Columbia. In 2001, Hawaii joined the task force, further broadening our regional scope. The Pacific States British Columbia Oil Spill Task Force annual meeting will be coming up and will be held virtually on November 18th. We hope that these existing opportunities can serve to further the conversation so that knowledge can be gained and trust can be built. Laurel and I want to thank you for the opportunity to share our reflection over the past couple of years and look forward to the outcome of now our last Salish Sea Shared Waters Forum, mouthful. We wanted to recognize the commitments by the participants and the attendees to build strong relationships from these forums. We look forward to many more years of collaboration on oil spill prevention, preparedness planning, and response. We again want to thank you for making the time to be here, for your participation and engagement. We also want to thank our conference planning team, facilitated by Beta Environmental, whose incredible leadership has been instrumental to the success of these forums. We also want to acknowledge our teams from British Columbia and Washington and the contributions from tribes, First Nations, and stakeholders that have participated in planning and presenting these past few years. There's more to come over today and tomorrow and in the future. There's an incredible amount of work ahead of us, and just again, appreciate this opportunity to share our perspectives. Back to you, Hillary.
Thank you so much, Dale and Laurel. Great overview. Really appreciate all the kudos at the end. If people could hang in there for a minute or two, we do have a question in the Q&A, and I'm going to invite Sarah Brace, who is actually the executive coordinator for the Pacific States British Columbia Oil Spill Task Force that Dale just mentioned. She has been monitoring the Q&A for this session. So Sarah, please join us via video and audio and pose the question to Dale and Laurel.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Hillary. Can everyone hear me? Just a quick thumbs up. Great. Dale, this is a question for you. Are bilateral collaboration between regulators as strong as it used to be? Washington State is doing its own risk assessment. Transport Canada is analyzing the potential amendment of traffic lanes. And the Pacific Pilotage Authority is conducting a risk assessment of the US-Canadian tug traffic. It doesn't appear to be well coordinated or an efficient use of limited resources. Could you comment?
Can you hear me? Thumbs up?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, good question. I think there has been a lot of work as the question was posed between different jurisdictions, both in the US side and the Canadian side. I think there has been a lot of information sharing over the years. Sometimes it can be better than others. There is risk assessment work that's going on here in the state of Washington that will be talked about later on here. We've had incredible participation from our Canadian federal and provincial partners and others from the Canadian side industry in that informing that process. And there have been communications that I think are beginning more so than in the past to continue to compare the risk work that's happening on the Canadian side, the risk work that we're doing, comparing lessons learned, and making sure that we're taking into consideration all the factors on both the US and Canada side. It's a work in progress. There are different factors that affect strong relationships at different times between different levels of government, but we all know that leaning forward, looking to the future, working better together has the best outcome, and that's part of why we convened this forum process over the past few years. is to engage, collaborate, build relationships, and learn and grow together.
Thank you for responding to that, Dale. Laurel, I don't know if you want to add on to that or have any thoughts?
Sorry, just using the technology. It's amazing using Zoom. I think we have found, I'll just say in general terms, that we have found great value in the relationship and the work that we've been doing together. There is more work to do. I can't comment too specifically. The reason being is that we are currently in an interregnum period in British Columbia. And so we have our election on the 24th. This work and next steps around our relationships in this space will be brought forward to our new government. But I can say we have very much valued the relationships and the work that's underway, and have seen some significant progress and initiatives on both sides or within the Salish Sea around this topic. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurel. Well, I want to say thank you to Laurel and Dale for a great presentation and sort of a look back on where we've come. And we will be kind of pivoting after the break to start looking forward to where we're headed. We are going to take a very